to review our meeting minutes from May 1st. Any comments, corrections, additions to our minutes?
Move approval.
All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Aye? Okay. And our next item is an informational item, the performance scorecard from Mr. Mark Ash.
Yes. So let me introduce Mark, who you know is the CEO of TransPro, the consulting firm that PSTA has been working with for about 6 months now on our overall, a whole new performance scorecard management program for PSTA.
Hello.
So this month at the board meeting, at least we're scheduling to have the board review the overall performance scorecard and take action, hopefully take action on the recommended list of performance outcomes for PSTA as a whole. Now, underneath that, of course, there's scorecards for every department within PSTA, and then ultimately then performance evaluations down to each individual employee. You're going to see that as part of Mark's PowerPoint, but what we'd like to present to you today is a discussion we had at our last month's executive committee also, specifically about the CEO evaluation tool and how that ties in. So that was too long of an intro, but Mark will do a better job.
Let me see if I can boil it down. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
So let me see if I can take Brad's comments and put it into context to this, because I don't want to give this presentation to you all as a standalone, because to Brad's point, it does fit into the context of overall organizational performance. And in working with a number of different boards, particularly in the transit space around the country, one of the great challenges is for a board to come together at the end of the fiscal year and figure out how are they going to evaluate their CEO's performance. And we would suggest that that conversation begins at the beginning of the fiscal year with clarity from the board in regards to what are the outcomes that they expect from the organization. Typically in three spaces, right? One regards to financial performance, one in regards to customer performance, quality of the customer experience, and one in regards to the health of the workforce. Some organizations may have some additional ones. There may be outcomes related to productivity. There may be outcomes related to a capital program. But the clarity is that stake in the ground. This is what the board expects from their CEO, and everyone's aligned as to what it is to cause that to occur, and then literally provide the CEO the ability to go execute against what that plan is and have the ability to deliver, if you will, the witch's broomstick back and indicate that whether we've been successful or not.
Witch's broomstick?
I was making a Wizard of Oz, which clearly some captured and some went over.
Okay.
But thank you for stopping me. Point being that the wizard gave clear definition to Dorothy what success looked like. Bring the broomstick, and you'll be able to take you back to Oz. That was kind of the point that I was making. At least it was funny for me. Do want to say at the outset, when a CEO and a management team may come up short from delivering upon the outcomes, that doesn't mean that they failed. I mean, perhaps the success definitions were too steep, perhaps other things came into play. There may be other factors that are in play, but the CEO and certainly the management team doesn't have the ability to deliver success if we don't know what it is at the outset. So the performance scorecard, the outcomes that you're going to be seeing later this month, as Brad was suggesting, as those cascade down into the department scorecards, that's all part of a comprehensive solution we've been working with the team on over the last 6 months. We're going to do one very specific piece today, which is the CEO evaluation and how it connects back up to that. So I want to make sure we got the bigger tools up here that fit up top. This is but one piece that bolts at the bottom in regards to putting together the CEO's performance. Have these slides, which we will leave for each of you, but it essentially walks through each of these elements in regards to what the background is, the distinctions between objective performance and subjective performance, the timeline that's associated, all the different inputs that would be in place in regards to those time frames, and then what the next steps are in regards to that. As I move to next slide, I understand that you all had a discussion regarding CEO performance at your last executive committee meeting, and do want to make sure we've got one point of clarity. Everything that's in this proposal and it's in the process that we're recommending for your consideration is 100% under the board's control. So the board is always the determining body of management success and whether the CEO has been successful. There was some discussion, I think, at last meeting about community input and customer satisfaction and all that. All definitions of success, all measurements of success live with the board. The board is always the controlling body in regards to that. So let's dig into the details. This essentially puts together, and I have as a starting point for you, a discussion around objective performance. So think of that, if I can use, since the Wizard of Oz metaphor didn't work, I'll use a football metaphor. This is that point when they put the chains down and you measure, did you make the first down by 6 inches or did you come up short by 6 inches? There's clarity of whether we made the first down or not. And that's the objective performance tied to two factors. So the first one are these agency outcomes, which I've spoken of. What are the key elements of success that the board would endorse? I'm going to share those with you in a second. And the second measurement of objective performance would be the performance scorecard. That elements of the ability for the board to track on a quarterly basis, are we being successful to realize the outcomes at the end of the year? No board, and certainly no, to go back to my football metaphor, no owner of a football team is willing to wait to the end of the year to see if their management team is being successful. You need the ability to track that on a quarterly basis. That's what the performance scorecard does. It tracks organizational performance on a quarterly basis towards the outcome, so you've got the ability to see, are we likely to be on track or are we not? That's objective criteria. We either made the first down or we didn't. Customer satisfaction was either a certain level or it wasn't. Our financial performance is a certain level or it isn't. There's clarity around that. It's really not open to a subjective decision. What is subjective is setting the outcomes, right? Is what are the outcomes that we believe represent success? That is subjective, but we do that at the beginning of the year so that the CEO and the management team have clarity. The bottom half of the performance review is subjective. And this is the part where I think maybe there was some confusion last month, and I want to make sure we've got absolute clarity. There is only one view in regards to the subjective behavior of your CEO, and that's the board's. What we've built into the process, which I'm going to share in a second, is providing the board with different inputs for you to look at as you're doing that evaluation in regards to subjective values. So this ties to the CEO's reflection of the PSTA values. Now you might ask me, Mark, what are those PSTA values? I'm going to share those in a second because to date we actually do not have board adopted values. So I'm going to share with you what those thoughts are. But the point being, at the top, objective performance in regards to did we hit the markers or not, coming from outcomes and performance scorecard. At the bottom, CEO's embodiment of PSTA values. To date, we're suggesting a 50-50 formula as a starting point. Typical CEO evaluation with a board falls in the 60 to 70% in regards to objective performance, 25 to sort of 35% in regards to values. So be very open to a discussion here. We've started at 50-50 for something to kind of get the concept in front, but typically with a board, it is more heavily towards did we make first downs or not, and less towards the way the spirit and the attitude is in regards to the locker room, the interaction with the workforce. The 5 outcomes that you see here are a starting point that we're suggesting after, I think I can say, many hours of discussion with the management team in regards to outcomes of success. So you'll see 5. One is to achieve a net promoter score of 30. The board might remember that you had a presentation, I think the middle of last year, in regards to your net promoter score. As a reminder, net promoter score is asking customers on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you recommend this service or product to a friend or to a family member? It's literally called the ultimate question. It's the most precise question of customer sat. 9s and 10s are promoters, 7s and 8s are passives, 0s to 6s are detractors. Your net promoter score is determined by the percentage of your promoters minus the percentage of your detractors. Your net promoter score last time around, as I recall, was a 32 or a 33. And so we're suggesting a net promoter score of 30 plus would represent success. I will point out that the average net promoter score in the transit industry is a 12. So the marker that we put in place is better than double. It's about 250% higher than industry norms. So certainly putting a push there. Second outcome is to finish the year with a balanced budget. So it's one thing to adopt a balanced budget, it's another thing to finish with a balanced budget. So we're suggesting the definition of success is to finish the year in that regard. Third definition of success is an employee engagement level. You'll notice that there's an X there because we don't have a baseline in place yet. So we're going to look to put a baseline in place before the fiscal year begins. But to hit an employee engagement level of X%, you'll notice that it doesn't say satisfaction. Right? So we're looking at something very specific there, and that's the engagement of the workforce, which is very different than the satisfaction of the workforce.
Can you
What
define
exactly
that?
do you mean?
Sure. So we had a lengthy discussion with the management team. Some organizations do focus on employee satisfaction. They're very focused in regards to the satisfaction level of employees. Satisfaction, and we've done a number of employee satisfaction surveys, tend to be, do you like coming to work? You know, are you satisfied with the work? It's essentially a measurement of your happiness. Engagement measurements are, I understand what my success looks like and how it ties to organizational success. My supervisor provides me with frequent feedback that is actionable. I understand what I need to do in order to be successful and contribute. So it's two very, very different ways to be able to look at the employee experience.
So engagement would mean that we would track meaningful conversations or interactions with employees as sort of like a lead indicator. The lag indicator would be whether they're satisfied or not.
So the measurement here, the outcome that we would capture would be an annual survey that we would do with the workforce. There's 3 questions that tie to that. They're weighted, and that would go to 1 score of employee engagement. You would track on a quarterly basis in the performance scorecard those interactions that you're suggesting. But this would be focused specifically on employee engagement.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'm a little confused about an employee meeting with or interacting with his or her supervisor when the person that we're evaluating is the CEO. So are we also talking about, company meetings, Brad walking around the plant saying, hi, how are you? Or how is that built into what we're asking here? Because I'm, everybody should have good relationships with their supervisor, but that's not the same thing as having, knowledge and interaction with the CEO.
Absolutely. So it's a good question that you ask. The reason I'm giving you this as kind of a foundation to move forward from is these are organizational outcomes. So what the board would be expressing to their CEO is these are the 5 definitions of success that we have for the organization. 1 related to customers, 1 related to money, 1 related to employees. And so the reason from the board's perspective is not that you're looking to evaluate the CEO based on how many town meetings he may have with employees and so forth, is does the CEO create the culture, right? The culture within the organization where employees have the ability to be engaged. That's what you're evaluating. So I'm sharing with you as sort of the outcomes piece before we ever get down to the CEO evaluation piece. What you're saying to your CEO is having an engaged workforce is important to us.
Okay. I would suggest that maybe that needs to be expanded somehow when we're actually getting down to having the board, vote on this concept. That we need to be able to understand the differential between engagement with Brad as opposed to creating the culture to have interaction with supervisors.
Sure. Yeah, we can be clear on that certainly. Fourth one is one that you have not seen yet, but we've had a lot of discussion with the management team, and that's in regards to beginning to establish what we think would be an ongoing and annual process to measure community value. So today we don't have that. It's not a device that we exist, yet important to the organization. So this first year would be to stand up a process whereby each year we would measure community value. So you'll notice here, number 1, we have the ability to measure the quality of the customer experience. Number 3, the ability to measure the employee engagement level of the workforce. And number 4, be able to measure on a quantifiable fashion the value that the community sees from that. And then finally, the 5th outcome for the organization, so important, these are at the organizational level, which the CEO is responsible to deliver, is that PSTA would be in the top 10% of the ABBG in regards to the value that it produces. So those are the 5 organizational outcomes. That's putting that stake in the ground. This is the end zone, if you will, of what success looks like.
Do you think it would be helpful if there was another column where after the outcome, you specifically identify the PSTA value that that's linked to so that we know why that's important?
Let me give some thought to that, perhaps.
If we're
Yeah.
holding the CEO accountable to, I think it was under the subjective section of where the board would hold the CEO accountable to PSTA values.
Right.
It seems like it would be important enough to write those values down.
Yeah, which we're going to share those two with you in just a second. Yep. Further questions on these? You'll notice, I hope, that there's great balance in the outcomes, right? So from a board perspective, you never want your CEO to be incredibly strong from a financial perspective, but have the employees all hate to come to work. You never want to have the CEO have it be a great place where everybody comes to work and can't wait to get here, but spends all the money. You never want to have both of those two and have a lousy customer experience. So there's balance across all of these to make sure community seeing value, taxpayers seeing value, customers seeing value, employees are engaged. Keep moving. So the chair was speaking in regards to leading indicators and lagging indicators. So these outcomes tend to be your lagging indicators, right? Are you creating the right culture to produce these outcomes? I'm not going to go into the detail of the performance scorecard. We'll share that with you in June. But this performance scorecard would be the device whereby we would track, you can't possibly read it from here, but these areas here in regards to commitment to performance, employee engagement, customer experience, financial performance, there's measurements there on a monthly basis where the management team and the board on a quarterly basis has the ability to track, are we in line to be able to deliver the outcomes that we've established? And to the question that was asked here in regards to town meetings and the things like that, we pushed really hard, and I think we've been successful here when we share the details, to make sure that we have results-based metrics rather than effort-based metrics. So simply having a town meeting or putting employees through training, those are nice, right? Those are interesting, but the question is, did the training make a difference, right? Did it reduce the number of accidents, or did it cause employees to better understand what their responsibilities were they went through? So the metrics in here are very results-based rather than effort-based. Going to training is interesting. Learning something at training is very different, right? We want to make sure we're getting to the learning and training. Values. So the chair just asked about values. We've had a couple of sessions in regards to, now let me explain this better. So values begins to move into the subjective side of the evaluation, right? How does the CEO specifically help to create the culture to be able to deliver upon these values? The values that we have here are the distinctions between, on the left-hand side, the objective results that the management team produces. Do we have a net promoter score of 30? Did we balance the budget? Are the employees engaged? It's doing it with the spirit that we find to be appropriate. So the story that I would use here, we may have the best player on the field, but if they're toxic in the locker room, that's not really the culture that we want to be able to have. The spirit by which someone shows up. So we've taken this into essentially 5 different values. I'm not going to read them, you can read them for yourselves. But one is in regards to being trustworthy, one is in regards to having robust debate, and then making sure once a decision is made that we support what that decision is implementing it, that we take personal responsibility to design solutions and ownership of the results, that we are individual innovators to ensure organizational success, and we put our colleagues in positions where they are trained so that they can be successful. So those are 5 values, and some of you may be seeing these for the first time as we try to knit these together. 5 values, which we're starting to noodle around. We, even as a group, have not settled on these as being the 5, but beginning to think that's the culture from a values perspective that we want people to be able to interact.
I think they make great values for the board, too. I think we should talk about it, something for the board. I mean, really.
So these would become, so this whole, the reason I started with the context is the entire package would come, so you would adopt definition of success, scorecard to track it, the spirit with which we show up to live with it, the metrics that are in the performance scorecard, and then the CEO, so it all fits together as a package. So this subjective piece, this is where I think maybe we got a little bit off course last month. As the board begins to come together and evaluates the CEO's performance in regards to those organizational values, you'll be able to evaluate in regards to the outcomes. We'll either have an NPS of 30 or we won't. I mean, there'll be absolute clarity. We'll either balance the books at the end of the year or we won't. There's absolute clarity in regards to that. But in reference to the values, that's much more murky, right? I mean, how do you possibly know that the CEO creates an environment that is trustworthy to others and gives their trust? How do you possibly know if the CEO puts colleagues in a position where they're trained to be successful? It's very difficult for a board to know that. Now, your view obviously is the controlling view. You're the board. Of course, it's the view that matters. What we've put together is a structure that will provide you with some input in your consideration. And that's all it is input. It's something for you to be able to look at. And as you're coming to your determination in regards to the subjective side, you have that. So there are 3 different inputs. The first is a CEO self-assessment, where the CEO will actually go through and assess their performance in regards to those values. The second is a management 360, where the CEO actually gets feedback from those employees whom he works closest with in regards to that, in regards to those organizational values. And then the third is a number of community leaders that will provide feedback, particularly related to the outcome of community value, right? So if we're going to measure community value, it's important that we know what do community leaders think in regards to the organization's performance, and particularly as it's embodied in the CEO. Those 3 elements are simply inputs for the board's consideration. That's all they are. It gives you something to look at as you're looking at that subjective side in regards to the CEO's performance. This would all ultimately roll up into an evaluation structure. So at the top, you'll begin to recognize some of those very same numbers. Those are the outcomes. Those can be pre-populated, right? We know the results of those. There's not ambiguity in regards to that. It either happened or it didn't. At the bottom is, I should say, are the board's thoughts in regards to those values. You'll consider those 3 inputs. You'll consider the CEO's self-assessment. You'll consider the 360 performance review from management employees. You'll consider the community leaders' feedback. But at the end of the day, the board will be the determiner in regards to that. You'll still see that 50-50 balance that we've got today between objective performance and subjective performance. I'd look forward to a discussion on the board's view. Do we want to be more heavily tilted in one direction or another? We've started at 50-50 really just as a starting point. And then it all ultimately rolls up in regards to CEO's performance.
I'm not sure if you've anticipated this, but when we have gone with numerical ratings previously, we had to come back and be very specific about what those numbers, it was like rating from 0 to 5, I think. And we had to be specific because, one person's 5 is another person's 3.
Sure.
So some people may think, you would need to walk on water to get, 15 points for employee engagement. while someone else may be more generous and just, throw out a 14 or 15 without any problem at all. So
Right.
I think with there being such a wide range of points, it would be fair to try to create some sort of system where it's normalized. again.
Particularly in the space that's subjective already, right? That's one of the benefits of this. Well, hopefully at least half, maybe we'll get to 2/3 or more, but a portion of it is objective. There's just, it's either a 30 or it's not, right? There's just no disagreement there. But I think your point's well made, having clarity around the subjective side to as tight as we can get it. It's like measuring pain, right? The doctor says, does that hurt? Everybody's level of hurt is different. So your point is well made.
So this is going to be essentially a one-page report, or is there also some written evaluation that's more subjective along with this?
For the board?
Yeah.
Yeah, the board will certainly be invited to provide beyond the values component. So the questions that we ask, are there things that the CEO should think about more deeply for the coming year? These are 3 areas where the CEO could demonstrate performance. So there would definitely be opportunities to go deeper for each board member in regards to that. What would populate into the performance would be the CEO's performance in regards to organizational values. That's what would populate into here. But we would want to create the framework for the board to provide feedback beyond that, certainly.
So, yeah, just to be clear, so but at least one of my goals on this, even though maybe it's not coming across that way, is for this to be easier for
Mhm.
board members.
Right, I accept that.
Yeah.
But it
and-
also may not allow us to really kind of expand on the different concepts and how we arrived at that.
Well, hopefully it will still allow that. The whole top of the page,
Mhm.
for the first time, half the evaluation, the board members won't have to do anything.
Mhm.
I will know, based on the great work of my staff, how many points I got on 50% of my grade,
Mhm.
right? Whether we achieve these results.
Mhm.
That will already be filled in.
Mhm.
Then there'll be a questionnaire, just like kind of like our current evaluation process, or like the ones that you do for your city manager or county manager. There'll be a board questionnaire that the questions will be framed around those value kind of things,
Mhm.
and then that will be worth 50%.
Okay.
So you'll still have that.
But then there'll be questions below that for you to be able to go deeper and provide feedback.
Okay.
Really questions for the CEO where you think he
Yeah.
ought to look in regards to professional development for the coming year. You may score him high in regards to reflection of organizational values, and he may have done well on the outcomes, performance, but there still may be 3 areas from your perspective that you think he ought to concentrate during the course of the coming year. There'll be an opportunity for that.
Mr. Johnson?
So you had 5 elements of reflection of PSTA's value. Would the board members address each of those 5? And then at the bottom would be a summary that would then lead to the cover sheet value summary.
Correct.
So you would expect to have some structure that the board members would fill out to come up with their score of 45 points.
Correct.
Yeah.
The whole concept of this, I think, to the point that Brad was making, is to make this much easier for a board member to be able to navigate and to be doing it at the beginning of the quote season/fiscal year, not doing it at the end, right? For a CEO to be successful, they have to know what success looks like before the season starts. And the idea here is, let's align on what the outcomes are. Let's agree that there's going to be whatever the percentage is, typically 50% to 70% would be objective performance-based, and the balance would be reflection of values. Let's align on that. And then as you move forward with the year and actually execute the performance review, you've already aligned upon the structure. It's set, and it's simply a matter of execution at that point.
I have one other question, if I may. In looking at these criteria, one of the things that is kind of cuts across everything is the ability to communicate effectively. And is this, and it's communicate effectively with various different elements, where would that be reflected, success or failure in this rating system? I guess if you're ineffective at communicating, you're not going to get a net promoter score, but
Community
is there-
support or the employees. probably.
Is there, I'm just kind of asking for Mark's
Yeah.
reflection.
It's a good question. I don't know if let me chew on that a little bit. So it's a good question. I don't know if I have a response for you. Let me chew on that a little bit.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
The only other comment that I'll make about this was, when we presented this kind of concept to you last month, we talked about having this community, business leader survey and employee 360. And there were some comments by the executive committee that, they wanted to make sure that the board got that input, and it was the board's evaluation process, not the business community's necessarily process. So now I think the evaluation process that Mark is putting forward does a good job of clearly showing that those will be inputs to the PSTA board. It's still the PSTA board members' decision on how they take those inputs.
Let me illustrate that in the timeline.
Well, and I'm just a little bit, in the past, I have provided the board members with quite a bit of information, basically a self-assessment and some other information for them to fill out. And as you all know, some board members, go through that very in detail, and some do not. Some use their evaluation to send a particular message on one particular topic or a few so I worry a little bit that we're going to provide this information, exactly how we're going to provide a structure so the board members can easily use it to help them. I'm not sure if we're there yet totally, but we're getting there.
Simplicity is the goal.
Yeah.
But I think you're gonna get that kind of feedback anyway, so I don't think you can.
There's diversity
I don't-
on the board.
Maybe
There's
not.
diversity and there's
You're gonna make
outliers.
somebody mad during the year.
You're gonna have your pencil whippers who are generous and the pencil whippers who are gonna punish you. And they, the outliers, typically, not just with this particular evaluation, but in general, the outliers tend to kind of cancel each other out.
Yeah.
I know it's painful to see negative things written about you, but, we can,
It's okay.
lead the horse to water.
I'm happy that we,
good example. I think
50%
this goes-
on it.
Not calling it
Yeah,
anything
I
else.
like the basic concept
Yeah.
that we're using a good data for a good part of this.
Yeah, me
So
too.
it does minimize that kind of
Yeah, that's what I like.
personality sort of
That's right.
backlash.
But at the end of the day, a board member has the authority, right? So it's the end of the day, I started there, the board member has the authority to take
Of
it where
course,
they
that,
choose
the
to.
one nasty comment is the one you're gonna remember, but.
Yeah, and I'll take you, Commissioner Jones, I think this goes to the point that you were making. The second value here is we invite robust debate and insist upon integrity in implementing decisions. Now, what that means to me is, and we had a lot of discussion around that, what that means is we fight like mad for our view, in a room, in a management meeting, fight with passion for our position, and when a decision is made, we're expected to go implement that with integrity, right? We're not supposed to disagree outside, we fight internally. You can see getting to a point where a board member would say, well, yes, you did, but I didn't like the decision that you made, right? And so you can see easily an evaluation being based upon, I followed the value, but I didn't like the outcome, of that. So you can see conflict over that easily.
Well,
Are you looking-
I'm sorry.
yeah,
are you looking for a
okay.
motion?
Well, no, we're not done with the
Okay.
presentation yet.
I've got one more slide to go. and then we
Okay.
can-
I think the question is based in some issues around communication a couple of years ago, and it was, maybe that's one of those lagging indicators or something,
Right.
but, and it's changed so dramatically that we want to make sure that that continues. So I'm not real sure how that fits into.
Well-
Because it was such, that one issue was really vital to the board.
Yeah.
We'll give some more thought in regards to how we could perhaps,
Well, we've got the same issue at our church. I mean, communication and the understanding what's going on.
So it might not even be the decision that the person doesn't agree with,
Right.
but the fact that the decision was made and I didn't know about it.
right.
You know,
Right.
so that,
I think I get the point that you're making. We'll see how to
Yeah.
incorporate that.
yeah.
That kind of goes to
Inclusivity or
transparency
whatever,
and
transparency.
openness, or we talk about that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, let me chew on that a little bit. Last thing that I wanted to share with you is in regards to process. So, mentioned this a couple of times, the importance of simplicity, right? Want this to be as simple as possible. So, at the top, you'll see it to be under the inputs, looking at the community value assessment, right? So we'll have a measurement of that. The management 360 process, where members of the leadership team are providing feedback. The CEO self-assessment, that would be happening in October, right? So right at the end of the fiscal year, which drops down into a summarization of all that, right? So the board will be getting a summary of all of those subjective inputs, along with, you notice the different color, these are the objective performance, how do we do against the outcomes, the performance scorecard, so that all will be presented as a package to the board. For them, in November, we'll know the performance results at that point in time for the board to begin doing its evaluation in December. So all of those things come to you. Some will be objective, right? Performance scorecard outcomes that either happened or it didn't. You'll get a summary of the subjective inputs. They are simply inputs for your consideration as you make your evaluation. And then all of that will tie ultimately into the CEO's performance review. So next steps, we're still internally in a dynamic discussion on this. We haven't settled on values. We haven't settled, you can see there's an X there on outcomes. We're still some back and forth with Brad, in regards to this. So we're not even, done at this point, but we wanted to get it in front of you for comment. Making a number of changes. Obviously, this coming in a full package to the board. We're looking at the end of this month. And then the last step in this, and we purposely put this as a bullet. Some of the folks on my team wanted to move into this discussion at this point. No, let's do this later. And that's the discussion of tying this to compensation and incentive opportunities. So, do we want to go to a place where we begin to tie incentive opportunities and compensation to certain markers that we might hit? Beginning to look at, all right, so if we deliver an NPS of X and that's a goal, do we set incentive opportunities in regards to that? Do we begin to set incentives for certain levels of employee engagement and so forth? So I welcome that discussion once we get the structure stood up, beginning to think about how we can ultimately tie compensation to
And is
this.
that related just to Brad or to the entire organization?
We would suggest a comprehensive solution is always best.
More on that later.
Can we go back to the prior slide, please?
Of course.
Now, the one with the time.
Yep,
Yeah,
sorry.
that one. Are we taking that much time now? I mean, by the time this is done, we're well into the following year. I'm trying to remember exactly when we finished up with the evaluation process, but I think.
Well,
this-
if you did away with that top thing, which is sort of invisible to the board until the results are all in,
Mhm.
I think we probably did take that long.
It's about.
From November 30th or December
Yeah,
1st.
it's like, I think it's a 1 month
Yeah.
earlier.
I remember being some of these where we were doing them in March, so you're almost
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I
halfway
mean,
through the
so
next
it's
fiscal
February,
year.
we're already halfway through the next fiscal year.
It'll take us about 60 days to get some of the year-end results in. So with some of those outcomes, we actually won't know those,
Mhm.
until
Okay.
into the latter
Right.
part of November.
So, I have a couple of questions. One, I think the Path Forward strategic document is very helpful. So I'm not quite sure how going back to look at that document connects with this process.
We use that as a starting point, and I think we can dust off here at the end as well to make sure that we're good. I think our thinking was that these outcomes that we established, align with the Path Forward program.
They do.
Yeah, and maybe like what I said earlier, you know, even with the path forward, we had these like little symbols for the value, or I don't
Yeah.
know. And like, if that was like part of another column next to the outcome, then it just becomes more clear how
Yeah.
it connects back
That's a
to
good idea.
a strategic and values document that seems to be, I think, something really good that we put together that was really thoughtful. This is maybe simpler.
But to your point, connect it more tightly.
And
I
then,
think we decided to call the path forward on our new website our strategic plan.
Just
And this is
nobody else
our,
knew what the path forward
this is,
was.
what do we call this? We call this our performance scorecard.
Keep it simple.
sure.
Well,
They should tie to each other, but they're different. A little bit different.
I think what we're developing here is more actionable, right? It's
Yeah.
clear work tactics tied to budget.
Yeah.
And then could we go to the next slide? One more, sorry. One more. That one. So this is maybe neither here nor there, but I just have to say it. The community value part of this, I do think it's important to look at community leaders' interaction with our CEO and to get their feedback. But I just think it also needs to be said that transit agencies, we can't do our work all by ourselves on our own. We are extremely dependent on cooperation, vision, and results from state and federal leaders as well. And I don't always appreciate it when certain state leaders maybe kind of command something and put PSTA in a strange position. I mean, we depend on leadership and cooperation between our state leaders as well. And I'm not satisfied with that level, and I'm just gonna leave it right there. But I just wanted to say that I feel like what we have up there is important, but it feels a little bit like a one-way street. Like we might have to capture potential negative feedback from a state leader, but if you turn around and show that, you know, and have them look in the mirror, it ain't so pretty either. I'll just stop right there.
I think as we begin to phrase questions in regards to that, important for us to be able to think about those words. So,
Yeah.
good point.
so, can I clarify that a little bit? Are you saying that the performance is not independent of what happens in the larger environment around us?
I didn't say that.
I mean,
I think that the community leader's impression of our CEO is important, certainly. But we're dependent on people to act in good faith as transportation leaders as well.
Well, I think that's a pretty small part of the
Yeah, and it's
overall
subjective.
values
And
evaluation.
subjective, exactly right. Yes, and it's one input for your all consideration. So it's trying to give you some data points as you're evaluating that, you know, with those three different elements. Happy to take further questions. Also happy to take comments offline. So if anyone wants to interact offline, happy to do so.
Well, it looks like this is on our June agenda to come back as a action item before the board. So I'm sorry if you stated this before, but what's the next process for how this may make its round through other committees? This is a lot, I think, to introduce to board members for the first time in a general board meeting.
That's what I was asking before. Do we need to make a motion to present this to either other committees or to the board as a whole with the imprimatur of the executive committee?
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was sort of feeling that a little bit myself, and thinking about taking the performance scorecard components. I'm gonna look at the agenda. Performance scorecard, the objective piece to the planning committee of PSTA
Mhm.
to look at that in a little more depth. That way, some more board members, or I have to think about the makeup, have some more board members to see this. And then, I was talking to Mark before, I mean, it would be nice to have, the board adopt everything, and feel comfortable with everything, but it might just take more than one meeting to do that. We might break, just for, in light of our most recent board meetings, healthy discussion on the mission and vision statement, it might take more than one meeting. Maybe we tackle the scorecard and then the values or something.
Well, I mean, an initial presentation would be helpful to get a sense of how we go forward with some general concepts here. I think if we ask for an action item to support it, we're going to get people who are going to start nitpicking every little
Yes,
word in the
exactly.
performance scorecard,
Not kidding, yes.
and I don't think we're ready for that type of level of scrutiny.
Right.
Excellent observation.
But we could be ready for that scrutiny, but to introduce that for the first time to a number of board members at one of our general board meetings is probably not the best way
Yeah,
to start the subject.
You still have monthly meetings with each board member, do you not?
Yeah.
Where this there's an opportunity for one-on-one comments. Like I had one this morning that I didn't understand.
Yeah. Well, let me think about it a little bit further. I was telling Mark, I know that the PSTA rules and regulations specifically say that that there shall be a personnel committee, and that the personnel committee shall recommend the format for the CEO evaluation. So we'll still have a personnel committee, and they will come later toward when we roll this out. The personnel committee can make modifications or vote to approve it, or they can do that. So the board doesn't necessarily need to do something separate. But I was thinking that the board should, in some way, as Mark's saying, define success, and sort of define these 5 strategies. And maybe, as you were saying, that maybe there is something related to communications specifically that needs to be more, direct. Talking about communication, maybe not in the scorecard, but maybe in the values.
Yeah, something about transparency and.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would like to take some of that and have the board vote on that. Although I don't want to
Could we
enormous
have the
amount of
board
wordsmithing.
Right.
Here, we have Commissioner Gerard, then Johnson.
I think whoever said about rolling out the performance scorecard first on the data.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then talking a bit about how we're going to get input for the values evaluation and where the different places that information will come from, including the board. But let's talk about a 360 evaluation and, community input and that sort of thing. Because I don't know that we need to wordsmith this, but I think the point is that we're trying to put together a whole different kind of assessment process and,
Yeah.
not just for you, but for the organization.
What if we divorced the two? So what if we?
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, so what if we?
At least at first, when we're trying to explain the whole thing.
So if we get the board to align around organizational success, organizational scorecard to track that on a quarterly basis, and the values by which we'll live, period. And then 60 days later, come back with, now that we've agreed upon organizational success, this is how we will evaluate our CEO's performance against the delivery of that. Just essentially.
Yeah, because I think it is a lot. And it's
I
two
do
different
too.
concepts.
And if we don't feel we have the in a position to do that, but I think maybe just split, and maybe we make.
We just know these people.
Yeah.
Commissioner Berkeley?
When do we need to have this completed? We need to have this completed by September 30th, I would assume.
Yeah.
So the problem that we're dealing with is the fact that we only basically have a board meeting once a month. We have other kinds of meetings during the course of the month, but we only have 3 or 4 months to get this thing wrapped up. So we need to concentrate on developing a way to make sure that every committee that would be interacting with this, every person that may have some reservations has those questions resolved, and so on. Hopefully by, say, maybe August, so that we can wrap this thing up in time to be ready to roll it out and use it during the coming fiscal year. So my suggestion is that we try to figure out a way to get whatever we want to nail down within the committees or one-on-ones with Brad, so that everybody is comfortable and will be able to, in fact, make a vote, have a vote, by, say, August.
Commissioner Johnson?
The comment that I was about to make, I think, is been already made by Commissioner Gerard, and that this would be presented to the board as a conceptual approval of the concept or the outline that will then be further refined.
Well, and I don't think,
Sounds good.
do we need to have the performance scorecard vetted and accepted by every member of every committee? Because
Well, no,
it's-
I'm just trying to
No.
make sure
Well,
that we
that's-
don't have an elongated board meeting, because it
exactly.
could run an extensive amount of time if everybody makes his or her comments at that board.
Well, I
It's better
understand
to
that.
have all those nailed down before we go to the board.
No, that doesn't.
I think that's
Okay, but we can just start doing this as a way to report to the board about
Mhm.
what the data about the performance of the organization. And we can start talking about the value assessment in the meantime. But this is something, I mean, Brad can change the reporting process anytime he wants. He might get some feedback if he deleted some things, but
That's true.
But I think this is a whole different set of information that the board would like to have,
Mhm.
So I don't see this needing to be vetted, and once we start getting it as a board, I think people are gonna say, oh, this would be a good thing to base part of that evaluation on. Because it's concrete, it's
Mhm.
data, and, in the meantime, talk about the various ways of getting information for the value assessment.
I think what we're
I
hearing.
think.
And this flows out of the
But
goals
I think we do
workshop.
need to divorce it, kind of.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting to is, so there's typically 3 key steps, right? So the first one is organizational success. What does that look like, right? Second is no board in its right mind wants to wait to the end of the year to know if organizational success is going to be achieved. So a performance reporting process to track whether you're there to achieve that. And then third, how do we evaluate our CEO's performance related to the above two? And in an ideal world, you adopt that as a package, right? Because it's a package, but there's no reason we kind of can't do it in pieces as well. But they all align, because that's the whole idea, is you want them all to be aligned.
I mean, at some point, we talk about the values evaluation over time, and then we talk about the actual CEO evaluation. And as we're talking about it, though, over time, we're talking about it applying to the whole organization. We almost need to divorce it from Brad's evaluation.
Yeah.
It's like.
So maybe in June,
That we can do later on and say, these are the measures that we're gonna be
It may be in
using for
June that
Brad's
we-
evaluation.
it may be in June we provide you that
That's an
comprehensive view,
evolution.
and you adopt the outcomes, and then we move to the scorecard the next month, and then we move, so it's just, we know it's gonna be a trilogy before we make the first one, right?
I mean, I would say if the executive committee, or if the board is okay with starting to use this, I think I'm okay not having the board adopt it. If I can, maybe I demonstrate that it is a report on performance. It is based on the Path Forward Strategic Plan, which is adopted, based on the adopted mission and vision statement. And if it's, we can start using it. And like you say,
We can, Brad,
get
but
smart.
we can
They will
start-
see it as a value, and then feel more comfortable with
Well,
it.
we can start to use it, but ultimately, Brad, I think you want to have the board adopt the performance scorecard because it's one of the key elements of how your performance is going to be evaluated. And what we don't want to be in a position is for the board to come back 15 months from now and say, well, I don't care about those metrics, I care about these instead. You know,
Well, yeah.
we've got to align on what the metrics are at the outset. So you did all those things, that's great, but I didn't
I
care
know.
about that, I wanted
I know.
blue, not
So
green.
we can bring that to the June meeting, though.
So,
Just
Yeah.
move the pieces.
so are we talking sequentially here that we would like, when we start using this particular process, do we want to adopt the structure now and use it for the evaluation that is going to be happening in the fall or December?
So that's happening in
And-
January.
Or can we wait until making it effective in the fall of 18? I think we probably want to do it, start using it because it's better than what we've had in the
Mhm.
past.
So can I suggest maybe best use of your time? I think I have a sense of why don't we come back to Brad with maybe a process of what we do over the next 120 days to be ready for the start of the new fiscal year?
Okay. And meanwhile, are we clear on what the action would be for our June board? What we're asking from our board members to approve?
So what I would recommend is that we break it apart and have a higher level discussion of the whole package. But the vote this month would be to adopt the business scorecard.
Okay.
The business scorecard and the 5, what are they called?
Outcomes.
5 strategic
Outcomes.
outcomes.
Mhm.
Community support, financial stability, customer satisfaction, employee engagement,
Mhm.
and commitment to performance.
And then we come back with a performance scorecard, and then we come back with a CEO evaluation. And then by the start of the new fiscal year, we've got our structure in place.
Yeah.
Great.
The only way the CEO can deliver you success is if he knows what success is.
Yeah.
Do you need a motion? Or no?
Yeah, let's do
Yeah.
it. I think we should. I'd like a motion to formalize this, please.
Okay, I'll make a motion to start the evaluation process using the new scorecard and discussing the 5 objective agency outcome criteria with the intention that long-term we will formally enact this as a new evaluation process for our CEO.
I'll second that.
Is that acceptable, the way I see it?
That's kind of what Brad said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, what Brad said.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
You bet.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Okay, our next item is our June board agenda review.
So in your packet is a copy of our draft agenda, and we're trying to schedule all these items to go before one of the different committees that's scheduled for this month. The other main discussion besides the scorecard that to expect at the June meeting is the budget. And so we will be, I think we're now planning on doing a combined presentation of the FY18 draft budget to both Finance and Planning Committee in the middle of their 2 meetings next Wednesday. Next Wednesday? Yeah. And we got some good news on whatever day that was, Thursday, about the property valuations. Uh,
8.5.
I haven't talked to Debbie. I don't know if she got bad news on Friday with health insurance rates or what.
Yeah, preliminarily bad news, but we've got a wide range we're looking at, some of which is good, some of which is
Okay.
so it's a mixed bag.
As I think I've told almost all of you during my one-on-ones with you. The budget is looking pretty good for next fiscal year, especially with the increase in property values driving up, improving our revenue situation there over what we had projected. But our biggest challenge is our health insurance rates. Our health insurance expenses are going up dramatically. So we need more time to see what other options might be available to try to get that down into a more reasonable rate. But that's really the main thing that we're focused on. Of course, the current fiscal year has been a challenge with the declining ridership leading to declining fare box revenue. We, so far, are having a pretty good trial of our half-price monthly bus pass for this month. Dramatic numbers of increase, at least on day one, of people buying it, making up in volume what we lost in revenue by putting it out on half price so far. We're actually making more money by making it at a lower cost. So, so we will keep tracking that. But again, we're going to present to you the proposed budget. It's really the proposed operating budget for next fiscal year. But we will also present the capital components, because that will be also approved at the same time in September. The draft plan for the capital program funds assumes that we're going to purchase hybrid electric buses in our fleet replacement plan and use the federal funds that we're expecting to receive and any one-time sources of funds. I think we're going to sort of frame the discussion about the budget in that way, that the budget, the operating budget, is paid for by ongoing sources of revenue. We want, the capital program does not use ongoing sources of revenue. It uses only grant or one-time sources of revenue for capital. So far, PSTA has not, at least as long as I've been here, used our property tax from the current year to fund our capital program. We've never done that, and we still don't want to do that, because I know there'll be some board discussion about, well, if we bought lower priced buses, wouldn't we be able to add service? Not necessarily, because we don't have the ongoing operating revenue to run that extra service. We would have one-time sources of funds. We'd save money on one-time capital money, but that wouldn't be very prudent to use one-time money to run transit. So they are separate, and the decisions about the buses doesn't really affect the operations. And I'm working on my one-on-ones as best I can to drive that point home.
Commissioner Barkley, you had a question?
I have a thing that we need to talk about, and that is with regard to our long-term fiscal well-being. In 2018, we're going to have a vote that's everybody's going to vote for, that's going to be detrimental to not only our individual municipalities or counties, but it's going to be devastating to us as well, in that we're going to lose $25,000 worth of valuation on our revenue from ad valorem taxation. And we need to put together a team, some kind of a group to evaluate different ways to handle this particular problem, because in 2019, we're going to have some serious issues. And I don't know how to do that, but I think it needs to be said that we've got to start planning for that with the assumption that that will pass, that resolution will pass. So that, because that's going to adversely affect our ability to continue to operate at the same level starting 2019.
Yeah. That's going to be part of our presentation to the board. But we are trying to already look ahead to that outcome and plan and present this budget sort of reflecting on the long term. We need to be starting to save money now.
I concur with what you were saying, but I'm just saying that's going to change in the future.
Yeah.
We're not going to be able to have the same level of income. We're already at max on our tax rate, so we need to figure out what we're going to do with that. And that needs to be some kind of a long-term planning group or team.
Point well taken.
Yep.
And to the degree that it may directly or indirectly impact PSTA, the penny for Pinellas vote in November has an even greater potential impact on local capital budgets in our municipalities and counties. So, losing the state referendum will hurt. Losing penny for Pinellas will really hurt.
I think penny for Pinellas is much more likely to continue, so that hopefully we won't have a problem there. But there's always that risk.
If the county or any of your cities are doing anything specifically related to the homestead exemption vote or planning for the lost revenue of that that you think would apply to PSTA, let me know.
Right.
Just talking about it.
Yeah.
Well, the main difference is that our cities have some millage cap, whereas PSTA has no.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Okay. Anything else on our June board agenda?
No?
Future meeting subjects?
I think we'll continue. This was a good discussion, a very helpful discussion, I think, on the values and the scorecard, and I think we'll keep talking about that at the coming meetings until we get that all through the board. So thank you for that. I think that'll probably be the main future meeting subject. We've got a couple other business items I just wanted to update the board on, or the committee on. Number one, we are working hard on improving and fixing issues that people identify on the PSTA website that folks have been concerned about. I think most of the missing agendas or minutes from historical PSTA meetings have been restored to the website. We're looking at putting back the entire history of PSTA board minutes, back as far as we have them electronically, back on there, because I know that's helpful. And I wanted just to give the executive committee a quick update on where we stand with the Jolly Trolley lawsuit. You recall, First Transit has filed a lawsuit against PSTA regarding the decision to award the contract to Jolly Trolley. There was a hearing that was scheduled that it was held at the federal court 2 weeks ago in Tampa, and the judge scheduled a second hearing on July 11th on that case. The First Transit has amended their motion to also now add Jolly Trolley Inc. to the groups that they're suing. So it's PSTA. They're suing both now PSTA and Jolly Trolley. So that's added a new wrinkle into the mix. but Alan Zimmond is doing a good job putting together pretty detailed arguments on our behalf. And last but not least, I just wanted to introduce Aaron Berglund, who's going to give you a little update on something that's happening tomorrow that he wants to invite you to.
Yeah, so tomorrow we are hosting our Break Spot Hall Pass event. And at the Hall Pass Break Spot event, we are giving away 250 summer bus passes.
Wow.
And we are giving away.
Do you want to describe what Break Spot is?
Yeah, Break Spot is for kids in Pinellas County who typically get lunch at school for free during the school year. And they're dependent on this lunch. And during the summer months, they don't have that free lunch at school. So what Break Spot does is they provide a free lunch at 12 o'clock at 180 different locations in Pinellas County. And this is hosted by Juvenile Welfare Board, JWB. And they've had a lot of success with elementary age kids in the past. They haven't had a very good luck with getting teens to come. Teens are kind of, I guess they're having a hard time because of, for different reasons. They're trying a pilot program to get more teens involved and coming to the Break Spots to get the free lunch. And so PSTA has teamed up with JWB and the City of Clearwater's Rec Center to host an event raising awareness about Break Spot and also raise awareness of our own great program with Hall Pass by giving away 250 Hall Passes for free to the kids who participate and show up tomorrow at the North Greenland Rec Center. So we're expecting a great turnout. There might be rain, but we do have indoor plans if there is rain. So we have the gym set up if we can't have it outside, but we prefer to have it outside tomorrow. And
What would be the awesome features that a board member who decided to attend could expect to enjoy if they come?
well, getting together with the community. I'm sure we're free pizza, of course. We're anticipating the likelihood of press showing up for this event, and it's just a great opportunity to get involved with the community and work with our partners and reach with the children who will be there. And, yeah, just a great opportunity, great positive press story for PSTA working with the community.
Thanks.
So if you're in Clearwater tomorrow at what, noon?
Yeah, 12 o'clock.
12 o'clock, come on over to the North Greenwood Library.
Greenwood Rec
I mean,
Center.
or Rec Center. North Greenwood Rec Center.
North Greenwood Rec Center.
Yeah. Gotcha. Cassandra, do you have an update? What?
$1 million? You want to talk about $1 million?
The governor must
Oh, that's right.
Well, yeah, I guess it's okay to talk about it. He signed it, right? It's done.
It's done.
Yeah, so the governor did sign the budget that included $1 million of PD&E funding for a Clearwater Beach busway.
Oh, awesome. It made it. Great.
It made it.
Waterborne transportation.
Yeah, I saw that.
But this is great for PSTA and Clearwater. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
Good
So
work,
the next thing
everybody.
is, the next step on that is for PSDA to work with Florida DOT to scope out the community input and PD&E work, and go through the procurement to hire a firm to help us do that. I've just been nervous about talking about it because but I think it's been great, so.
If you talk about it, it's real.
It is real. It is exciting.
It's kind of related to your comments about state legislators. You know.
We're very, very, very grateful for the $1 million.
We're grateful, yeah, exactly.
Take back everything I said. Okay, so I think we're near the end of our meeting then. Any other comments,
Yeah.
Commissioner Johnson?
I don't know whether this is future meeting subjects or other business, but I'm getting into my role as the PSTA's rep on the MPO, and trying to understand what things to push, what issues. And one thing that came up at the last MPO meeting was a tentative priority list and the movement of some of our projects down on that. And trying to make sure that that doesn't have unintended consequences. Also, the upcoming MPO meeting may be addressing the TMA's project priority list, which what happened last Friday. And one of the things that has happened there is that they still have 5 categories, but there's more stuff in those 5 categories. So it's not necessarily a priority list. It's just everything that everybody wants. And within that, I'm trying to understand what their operating goals are. Because one of the goals that to me is important is that there's a balance between your investments that you make in the outlying areas of the region, that you want to do that, but at the same time that those investments do not suck the support out of the existing central core. And I didn't see that kind of discussion occurring, so I'm trying to find out where the vision or the objectives are. So I share that with you. The other thing I'd share with you, I've been trying to ride the bus this month. I rode it to the city council meeting last Thursday night and home. Met some nice people on the bus. Shared some comments with Brad. And for this meeting, I have a 1:30 meeting, and if I was taking the bus, I should have left 18 minutes ago. So, to get to a 1:30 meeting. So I'm understanding what taking the bus really means. Thank you for allowing me to share those.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So without any other comments, we're coming up on 1 hour and 20 minutes. So thank you, everyone. This was a good meeting, good discussion about important things. We adjourn our executive committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. See you in Gulfport tomorrow.
Right.
Tomorrow, right? Yeah.
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 Tomorrow, yeah. I'm
And you would have gotten kind of wet too.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's not raining out there.
Well, we've gotten wet coming here.
Yeah.
Oh, he's gonna come to your meeting.
I think we're not done with the rains now.
Well, he's running.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess that's it.